Hello, my name is Felicity. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, things would eventually get better. That being the good kid, the obedient one, would protect me. But silence didn't save me. It buried me. My stepmom smiled to the world while she shoved me into the dark. She told the neighbors I was unstable. She told my dad I was manipulative. She told me, no one will hear you. But what she didn't know is that someone did. Why would a teenage girl need a watch that could send an SOS? And how many times had she used it before anyone even noticed? Why was the basement always so cold and so quiet? Would you believe me if I told you this wasn't the first time I was locked down there? Would they have believed me at all if the watch hadn't spoken first? I remember the rain that evening, not heavy, not wild, but steady. It felt like the kind of rain that knew how to settle in your bones. The streetlights outside flickered through the grayness, casting a dull amber glow against the kitchen tiles. It was September in Everett, Washington. School had just started again, and the trees were beginning to surrender to fall, their green fading into a reluctant yellow. I was sitting at the kitchen table, barely touching my dinner. Across from me, Verena didn't say a word. Her fork clicked lightly against her plate, every motion deliberate. She hadn't looked at me since we sat down. Dorian had left that morning for a 3-day business trip to Spokane. He said he'd be back by Saturday. He always said that like it was a promise that fixed everything. The silence in the house was nothing new, but that night it felt sharper, tighter, like a rope being pulled on both ends. I wasn't trying to make noise when I reached for the salt shaker. My elbow just brushed the rim of the water glass too close to the edge. The crash it made as it hit the floor was louder than it should have been. Water and glass exploded outward like a firecracker had gone off under the table. Verena didn't flinch. She just stood up slowly, walked over to the cabinet near the fridge, and opened the drawer where she kept the basement key. I froze. "Really?" she said, voice flat. "Again?" "I'm sorry," I stammered, already on my knees, picking up glass shards with my bare hands. "Don't worry," she continued, closing the drawer quietly. "It's not about the glass, not really." I paused, looking up. "It's about the ring," she said, now facing me. "What ring?" I asked, confused. She raised an eyebrow like I'd just insulted her. "The ring my grandmother gave me, the one that's always in the dish near the sink. It's gone." I stood slowly, still holding a piece of wet napkin. "I haven't touched it." "Of course you haven't," she said. "You never touch anything. You never take anything. Nothing is ever your fault." I knew that tone. It wasn't anger. It was preparation. She was building a story, and I was the villain in it. "Verena, I didn't take anything." "You've been disrespectful to this house for months. You think you're smarter than everyone. You think I don't see the way you look at me." She took a slow step toward me. "You think you're better than me because you were here first? No?" She held up a hand. "It's fine. You need time to think. Let's go." I took a step back. "Go where?" "The basement." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten me. She just turned and walked toward the hallway. I followed. Somehow, my feet obeyed her faster than my mind could protest. I should have run. I should have called someone. I should have done 100 things. But my legs moved like they belonged to someone else. When we reached the door, she turned around, eyes unreadable. "I'd like to say this hurts me," she whispered, "but I think you need to know what silence feels like." She opened the door. "No one will hear you." Then she shoved me. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the first step. Before I could turn, the door slammed shut behind me. I heard the lock twist. Then nothing, pitch black, no light from anywhere. The air down there was different, wet, thick, like something had been rotting in the corners. It smelled like old cardboard and mildew and a kind of cold that never left. I tried to steady myself, one hand on the wall as I took the steps slowly. Halfway down, I missed a step. My foot hit nothing, and I crashed forward, scraping my knee against the concrete. My palms broke the fall, but it didn't stop the sting from creeping up my spine. I lay there for a second, face against the damp floor, too stunned to cry. Then I sat up. I couldn't see anything, not my hands, not the steps behind me, just black. I sat with my arms around my knees, pulling them in tight. My breathing was shallow, each inhale a quiet plea not to panic. I'd been down here once before, when I was 13. I remembered the way the cold floor had made my stomach cramp, the way hunger had clawed at my ribs by morning. That time, Dorian had been out of town, too. Verena told him I had locked myself in during a tantrum. He believed her. I didn't cry. I don't cry in front of her. Not anymore. But I whispered, "Is this just punishment?" I said aloud. "Or is this who she really is?" My voice didn't echo. It just vanished into the air, swallowed whole. Then I remembered the watch. I'd worn it every day since Aunt Illyria gave it to me, a little square screen with a pink silicone strap. I wore it because it tracked my steps, because it buzzed when I had texts, because Aunt Illyria said, "If you're ever in trouble, hold the side button for 3 seconds." I reached for my wrist. It was still there. My fingers were trembling. I pressed and held. 1, 2, 3. The watch vibrated once. Then a tiny red light started to blink at the bottom of the screen. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It wasn't loud. It didn't ring or make a sound, but it was blinking. That meant the signal went out. Maybe. I stared at it in the dark, the faint glow the only thing I could see. "Please," I whispered, "let someone be listening." The red light blinked again, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the dark. I kept my eyes on it, not because I expected it to do anything more, but because it was the only thing down there that proved I still existed. Everything else, the concrete walls, the silence, the cold, made me feel like I'd already been forgotten. I didn't move for a while. I didn't dare. I was scared that any sound, any shift in weight on the stairs, would bring her back. Verena was unpredictable when she felt cornered. I learned that the hard way, like the time she locked me out in December without a coat because I'd rolled my eyes. As I sat there, legs tucked up under me, the weight of the day collapsed onto my shoulders. I tried to piece it all together, what I'd said, what I'd done. How had I ended up here again? Had it been the broken glass? Was it the way I didn't look up fast enough when she spoke? 2 days ago, I forgot to take out the trash. Maybe that was it. She always found a reason. A week ago, Dorian, my father, had looked at me strangely after dinner. His fork still hovered above his plate when he asked, "Did you remember your meds today?" I blinked. "I don't take meds." He looked confused. "Verena said you've been on something for your moods, for focus." There it was, that tiny crack in trust, and I hadn't even seen it happening. Verena had been planting seeds behind my back, little hints that I wasn't stable, subtle jabs masked as concern. She told neighbors I was going through a phase and told Dorian I'd been lashing out. I should have seen the setup coming, but I didn't, because who wants to believe their stepmother is waging a quiet war against them in their own home? The watch buzzed again. I nearly dropped it. A faint glow spread across the screen. A message appeared. "SOS received. Stay still. Help is on the way." For a moment, everything inside me crumbled. I felt it in my throat, in my chest, in the way my shoulders shook just slightly. It was the first time in months, maybe years, that I felt like someone was listening. Maybe Aunt Illyria got the signal. Maybe she was already on the phone with someone. Maybe. But a dark thought clawed its way up. What if this was a test? What if Verena knew I'd press it? What if she set this up to see how far I'd go? She was clever like that. She liked to play the long game. The buzz was followed by silence. No more updates, no confirmation. I stared at the screen, waiting for something. Anything. Then, footsteps upstairs. Slow. Steady. A knock. I held my breath. I couldn't hear words, just the rise and fall of Verena's voice through the floorboards. Calm, cheerful, casual. The kind of voice she used when chatting about wine at a PTA mixer. The door shut. Footsteps retreated. No one came to the basement. My stomach sank. Had they left? Did she talk them away? Did they believe her? Panic bubbled in my chest. I pressed the side button again on the watch, even though I knew it was pointless. One press wouldn't send another signal. It had already gone out. I wrapped my arms around my legs again and leaned my head back against the wall. That was the thing about Verena. She knew how to sell the story. Everyone loved her. She baked for the block parties. She laughed too easily, too loudly. She wore pearls when she hosted. She was PTA perfect, and I was just the moody teen still mourning a mother nobody else seemed to miss. People saw what they wanted to see. Even Dorian. She made him feel chosen. That was her power. She stepped into the space my mom left behind and filled it so well that even I almost believed she belonged. There was a time, maybe 3 months after she moved in, when I tried calling her mom by accident. She laughed, said it was cute. She never let me forget it. Another flash of memory. One night last year, I stayed home sick from school. I'd barely eaten, had a low fever, and just wanted to sleep. Dorian came home early. Verena met him at the door, arms crossed, smile tight. She skipped school. Again. What? He said. She's fine. I told her if she's going to fake it, she needs to do a better job hiding the laptop. He looked at me. I tried to explain. My face was flushed, my hands shaking. He didn't believe me. She lies about everything, Verena said, her voice calm and disappointed. And he nodded. That was the night I stopped trying to explain myself. I looked down at the blinking light on the watch. Still glowing. I didn't know who saw it. I didn't know if anyone would do anything. But for the first time, I wasn't just waiting. I pulled the watch strap tighter around my wrist. Not because it was loose, but because I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel something that was still mine. Even if no one believed me, even if they left again, I wouldn't stay silent this time. I heard movement above again, quicker now, not the same slow saunter from earlier. This time, the footsteps didn't turn away. They were coming straight for the basement. There was a pause. Whoever was coming stopped right at the other side of the door. I held my breath so tightly I could hear the pulse thudding behind my ears. For a second, I thought the knob would turn. I thought maybe, just maybe, the door would creak open and this would all end. But the knob didn't move. Nothing happened. Silence again. I sat perfectly still at the base of the stairs, the red light on my watch blinking faintly beside me. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator upstairs and the occasional creak of old wood. Someone had been there, but they left. Or they were still watching. Waiting. I didn't have time to guess which. The quiet gave my mind permission to wander, though I wish it hadn't. My thoughts crawled back to a winter I'd tried hard to forget, 2 years ago, before Verena even moved her things fully into the master bedroom. It had snowed that night, heavy enough to coat the back porch in a thick white sheet. I'd been late getting home from school because the buses were running slow, and when I walked in, soaked to the bone and shivering, Verena was waiting with a towel in one hand and a question in the other. "Where were you?" she asked, lips tight, eyes flat. "The bus was delayed. The snow—" I started. She shook her head and walked toward the kitchen, her voice cutting sharp through the air behind her. "You're always full of excuses." That was the night I ended up in the basement for the first time. Back then, the bulb hanging from the ceiling still worked, but barely. It flickered like it couldn't decide whether to help or haunt. There were cardboard boxes piled along the walls, some half open, filled with things from my mom that Verena said she was sorting through. She never did. The smell of mildew had already started to creep in. She left me there with no coat, no blanket, and no way to call anyone. I curled up behind an old folded ping-pong table and waited for the morning. The next day, when Dorian returned from a late shift, I told him. I told him everything. And he stared at me like I'd accused the mailman of murder. "She told me you got upset and locked yourself in there," he said. "Said you were having one of your episodes." I remember standing in the hallway, dripping from the melting snow still caught in my shoes, and thinking, he really believes her. That was the night something in me started to fold, not break, not yet, just fold inward, quietly. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I would talk back, when I'd shout, slam doors, demand to be heard. But that never worked. It only made her dig in deeper. She was strategic. On my 15th birthday, Verena hosted a small gathering in the living room. Dorian had invited 2 neighbors, a couple of his work friends, and her sister's family. She baked a cake, store-bought but passed off as homemade, and made sure everyone had something to drink. She even gave a toast. But when the chairs were being set up, she pointed to the far corner by the fireplace. "You can sit there," she told me, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "That way, you're not in the way when people walk through." I sat there the whole evening. Nobody noticed, nobody asked. That same year, when we sent out the holiday card, it was a photo of Dorian, Verena, and her niece sitting in matching sweaters on the porch. My name wasn't on the envelope. The card said, "Warm wishes from our home to yours, the Harrisons." It wasn't my home anymore. Not really. I pulled my knees closer to my chest, the dampness from the basement floor seeping into my jeans. My fingers ran along the cracks in the concrete near the bottom stair, tracing old, uneven lines carved into the surface. At first, I thought they were random scuffs, but then I recognized them. Chalk. I leaned closer, squinting at the faint lines and numbers. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. I'd done this. I was 13, and Verena had locked me down here for nearly 3 days once. I marked the wall each morning with a piece of sidewalk chalk I'd found near the laundry pile. Dorian was on a conference trip that time, too. When he came back, I said nothing, because I knew she'd tell him I was lying. Looking at those chalk lines now, I felt something twist in my gut. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. This wasn't punishment anymore. This wasn't a timeout. This was removal. I wasn't being disciplined. I was being erased. Verena didn't see me as a stepdaughter. She saw me as an inconvenience, a threat to her carefully curated reality. Every time I spoke up, every time I stood my ground, she twisted it into another example of how unstable I was. Dorian wanted peace. He didn't want to question the woman who cooked dinner, organized his sock drawer, and always knew the right thing to say when guests came over. And I had made it easy for him. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my palms. The air in the basement was heavier now, as if it had absorbed the weight of what I'd remembered. In the corner, by a stack of broken storage bins, I spotted a snapped-off plastic handle. It had once belonged to a tote full of Christmas decorations. I picked it up and walked to the center of the floor. Then I crouched down and dragged the handle through the dirt, drawing a thick, straight line across the floor. "This is the last time," I whispered. Not because I expected someone to hear me, but because I needed to say it out loud. I sat back against the wall, the line in the dirt stretching before me like a marker between the girl I had been and the girl I needed to become. From upstairs, I heard the doorknob rattle. Then her voice, too calm, too sweet for what she'd done, dripped through the cracks in the floorboards like poison in honey. "Sweetheart," Verena called, "why don't you come out now?" She didn't yell. That would have made too much sense. No, Verena spoke through the door like she was inviting me to brunch. "If you just behaved," she said, her voice smooth and steady, "we wouldn't be here." I didn't answer. My back was against the concrete wall, legs pulled up to my chest, arms wrapped tight around my knees. It wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the performance. The way she made it sound like this was mutual, like this moment had been negotiated between 2 consenting adults, like I had chosen this. I could picture her on the other side of that door, probably barefoot, leaning slightly on the doorframe, face soft. Maybe she had a glass of wine in one hand. That was her favorite trick, being calm. She didn't yell, didn't threaten. That wasn't her style. Her weapon was sugar-coated reason. It made everything she did seem justified, even locking a child in a basement. "If you could just learn how to talk like a normal person," she added, "this wouldn't keep happening." My heart pounded against my ribs, not from fear, but from fury, cold and quiet and ready to burn. I kept my lips pressed together, but inside I was screaming. This wasn't discipline, this wasn't punishment, this was survival. I remembered the school counselor. I was 14, and we'd had an assembly on emotional safety. Afterward, the counselor pulled me aside in the hallway. I don't even remember what I'd said. I must have looked pale, or tired, or something. She asked if everything was okay at home. I said something like, "Sometimes I don't feel safe." She nodded, took notes, asked if I wanted to talk in private. That was the only time I almost told. Verena showed up at the school the next morning, smiling wide, holding a plate of lemon bars, said she was there to donate snacks to the counseling office and check in on Felicity. She chatted with the front desk staff, complimented someone's haircut. By the time she left, I was just another moody teenager over-dramatizing a grounded weekend. After that, I kept everything inside. But not Aunt Illyria. I thought of her now, how she never fell for Verena's soft edges. Illyria lived in Portland, far enough to be out of the day-to-day, but close enough to stay in my life. Every birthday, she sent handwritten letters. Every video call, she looked me in the eyes. She never asked if I was being good. She asked if I was being heard. The watch she gave me wasn't expensive. It didn't have GPS or video, just a small emergency alert feature, buried in the settings. When she handed it to me last Christmas, she said, "If no one listens to your voice, let data speak for you." At the time, I thought it was a poetic way of saying, stay in touch. Now I realized she knew. I glanced at the screen again. 22% battery left, still blinking, still quiet. The screen had dimmed, but the red icon at the top corner gave me something to hold on to. With a trembling thumb, I tapped through the menu and typed a short message. Still locked. I hit send. Then I listened. Upstairs, Verena's footsteps moved away. A pause. Then laughter. Short and sharp, not real. I heard her voice on the phone, all sing-song and bright. "Yeah, no, everything's good here," she said. Silence. Then more fake laughter. Felicity staying with her aunt for the weekend gave me a little break. Lord knows I needed it. My stomach turned. She was covering her tracks in real time. She walked past the basement door again. I heard the faint creak of the kitchen window being pushed open. The scent of lavender fabric spray wafted down, probably spraying it over the sofa cushions. The illusion of peace had to smell like something. A knock echoed upstairs. I froze. From the window, I could barely make out the muffled voices. A man, deep-voiced. Then Verena, bubbly and apologetic. "Oh, you must be thinking of last weekend," she chirped. She came back for her book bag. I wasn't home, so she just waved at you and left. You know teenagers. A pause. "She's with Illyria now, down in Portland. I can text her if you want." The man mumbled something I couldn't catch. "No, no need," she said quickly. "Thanks for checking, though. Really." The door closed. Her heels clicked softly across the hardwood floor. I sat frozen for a full minute, processing the truth. She lied without hesitation, without blinking, without conscience, to neighbors, to friends, to the people who would vouch for her when everything fell apart. I stood slowly, legs stiff from crouching too long. My knees cracked. The air felt heavier again, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done waiting. I started pacing. From one side of the basement to the other, arms crossed, heart pounding. "You think no one hears me?" I said softly, to the shadows around me. "But someone will." I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or to myself, but the words felt like armor. I took another deep breath and stared up at the wooden beams above me. They'd been part of this house longer than I had. They'd heard more truth than anyone upstairs ever had. I whispered again, firmer this time. "I'm not staying quiet anymore." And just then, my watch vibrated. Not a message, not an alert. A live signal. It was faint at first. A vibration so subtle I nearly missed it. But it was there, steady, real, alive. I looked down, and the watch screen lit up. Live connection active. My hands trembled as I held the display closer to my face. Then a voice, small, slightly distorted but unmistakably human, came through the tiny speaker. "Felicity, this is Officer Torres. If you can hear this, help is on the way." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. I'd been quiet for hours, but this was the first silence that didn't make me feel invisible. It was happening. Somebody knew. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from the sudden flood of something I hadn't dared to feel in days. Validation. All the gaslighting, the whispered insults, the subtle digs. You're too sensitive. You always take things the wrong way. Stop acting like a victim. None of it mattered in this moment. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Someone on the outside believed me enough to connect. Verena didn't know. Upstairs, she still moved like she owned the house, like everything was fine. The faint sound of a sitcom laugh track reached down into the basement. I could picture her stretched out on the couch, phone in one hand, a glass of wine in the other, legs tucked up under that ridiculous cashmere throw she always showed off at holiday parties. If the police were already tracking the signal, they had my location. They knew I was still in the house. I pressed my hand against the cold concrete wall and whispered, "I warned you." Not out of spite, but out of truth. This wasn't fear anymore. This was resolve. She could hum her way through the evening. She could straighten the kitchen towels and wipe the countertops, but she couldn't clean this up. Not this time. My fingers tightened around the edge of the watch strap, and that small defiance, it grounded me. Of course, this wasn't the first time I'd tried to fight back. Years ago, I'd recorded her once, her voice rising in that syrupy, cruel tone she used when no one was around. I'd hidden my phone in the laundry basket, hit record, and let it capture everything. When she found it, she didn't scream, she didn't scold, she smiled, took the phone, walked to the kitchen, and slammed it against the tile floor until the screen cracked, then split, then shattered completely. Then she knelt beside me. "Try that again," she said, "and it won't be the phone that breaks next time." I didn't try again. Not until now. The difference. This watch was always on me, always part of me. She didn't think twice about it. Just another teenage gadget to mock. Her mistake. I adjusted the sleeve of my sweatshirt to cover the blinking screen and sat back on the bottom step. My ears strained for sounds beyond the walls, laughter from the TV, ice clinking in a glass. A door opening, maybe the fridge. I didn't know how long it would take for help to arrive, but I knew one thing. She wasn't in control anymore. Not fully. My heart nearly stopped when I heard her voice again, this time from the kitchen, more forceful, impatient. "Dorian," she said on the phone, louder now. "I'm telling you, she's doing it again." There was a pause. Then she laughed, but it was forced. "No, she's not actually stuck. She put herself down there. She locked the door from the inside. She's trying to guilt me." Another pause. Then softer. I know, but this has been exhausting. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Drag her out kicking and screaming? That'll just make it worse." I imagined him on the other end, tired from travel, looking at a hotel wall, nodding without listening. His answer came, muffled but clear enough. "Just try to keep things calm, Verena." She smiled into the phone. I didn't see it, but I knew the expression. "Always do," she said sweetly. And then she hung up. That was her safety net. The man who trusted her because she kept his shirts pressed and the living room clean. A knock came minutes later. 3 sharp taps, not frantic, not urgent, but purposeful. I stiffened. Footsteps above, the scrape of her chair, the click of heels across the tile. The door opening. "Hi there," Verena said, voice dripping with hospitality. "Can I help you?" A male voice responded. I couldn't hear the words, just the rhythm of concern. Then came her answer, light and airy. "Oh, no, it's just me here tonight. My stepdaughter is visiting her aunt in Portland. You must have seen her last week." Pause. "She came home briefly yesterday, grabbed her book bag, and left again. You probably just missed her." My stomach churned. The man must have said something else because her tone turned just a touch firmer. "I appreciate the check-in," she said, "but I assure you, everything's under control." The door closed. My jaw tightened. The seconds crawled by. Then the front door creaked open again. I stood. Each step up the basement stairs felt like I was pushing through quicksand. When I reached the top, I raised my fist and pounded against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. "I'm here!" I shouted, voice cracking, but clear. Silence. The kind that doesn't come from quiet, but from shock. I backed away from the door, heart racing. Somewhere upstairs, someone had just heard something they weren't supposed to. And for the first time in 2 years, I heard something in Verena's voice that I'd never heard before. Panic. Her voice cracked, just barely, but it was enough. Enough to tell me she wasn't in control anymore. I stayed still, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to hear her fall apart. After years of listening to her pretend, hearing even one edge of panic slip into her voice felt like justice knocking early. I was still standing at the top of the basement steps, my hand hovering near the doorknob. It didn't open. Instead, I heard the rustle of hurried movement, her slippers against the hardwood, the creak of floorboards she always told me to avoid when guests were over. Then, her voice again, lower this time, almost a hiss. "Felicity, don't you dare make this worse for yourself." She was trying to recalibrate, to reel the situation back in like she always did. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence I gave her now was louder than any argument I could have made. I heard her shift again. "What are you even trying to do?" she whispered, more to herself than to me. "There's no one here. They're not coming." "You're just trying to embarrass me." It was too late for that. The performance was unraveling. The scream I had let out minutes earlier had cracked the stage lights wide open. For the first time, her voice couldn't cover the truth. A pause. Then the key turned in the lock. The door opened slowly, inch by inch, as if she hoped the delay would erase what had already happened. She peeked around the corner and smiled, tight and controlled. "There you are," she said, like we'd just bumped into each other in the hallway. "Honey, what are you doing down there?" I didn't move. "Come upstairs. You've had your little moment. Let's not be dramatic." Her tone was too even, too soft. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and met her eyes. "Don't call me that." She blinked. "What?" I said, "Don't call me that." She clutched the doorframe a little harder. "Felicity, you're blowing this out of proportion." I took a step up. "You locked me in here." Her face changed, just a flicker. She tilted her head and offered the practiced frown. "That's not true. You were upset. You wanted to be alone. I respected that." Another step. "You shoved me. Stop twisting this." Her voice jumped half an octave. We both heard it. So did the people outside. Another knock. She spun around, startled. "Ma'am, police department," a voice called through the front door. "We're following up on a wellness alert. Could you open the door, please?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted to me, then back toward the living room. I stepped forward again, my voice low. "They heard me." She glanced toward the basement like she might slam the door again, lock me back in, pretend nothing had happened. But she couldn't. We both heard the knock turn into a fist. "Ma'am, this is a serious request. Open the door now." She backed up, still holding on to her version of the story like it might save her. "I'll handle this," she said. And then she was gone, up the stairs, through the hallway, down to the front of the house. I followed slowly, keeping just enough distance to avoid her reach, but close enough to watch her unravel. From the kitchen, I heard her voice, falsely bright. "Officers! Hi, sorry, it took me a minute." "Step away from the door, please," one of them said sharply. "Oh, of course, it's just a misunderstanding. Everything's fine here." A beat. "Ma'am, we need you to back up. We're coming in." "Wait, that's really not necessary. You're scaring." The wood cracked. The door crashed open. For a moment, everything froze, even Verena. She stood there in her cardigan and pearls, hands half raised in mock surprise, mouth open just wide enough to feign concern. Flashlight sliced through the hallway. 2 officers stepped inside. One held a tablet, eyes scanning, the other focused on Verena. "Is there anyone else in the house?" the younger one asked. She started to answer, but I stepped into the doorway behind her. "I'm here," I said. They turned to me. "Are you Felicity?" one asked. I nodded. Verena spun, face pale. She's making this up. She does this. She gets dramatic." The lead officer walked past her without flinching. "Can you come with me, ma'am?" He reached for my arm, but not in a forceful way. I followed him through the hallway, past the kitchen, into the living room where two more officers were entering through the side entrance. Behind me, Verena kept talking. She's always been unstable. Ask her father. She lies. She lies all the time. But no one was listening to her anymore. One of the female officers, older and calm, gently guided me to the couch. She knelt down beside me, pulled out a notepad. "My name is Officer Torres," she said. "We received an emergency signal. Can you tell me what happened?" I nodded. She locked me in the basement. I pressed the SOS on my watch. She looked down at my wrist. "May I?" I held it out. She tapped the screen, read the notifications, then her eyes flicked to the log history. She didn't say anything at first, but I saw her expression tighten. "You've had this watch for how long?" "About 9 months. My aunt gave it to me." She tapped again, scrolled through the data. "It's been logging distress signals, heart rate spikes, audio spikes, movement patterns showing confinement." Another officer came over with a camera and began photographing my wrists, which still had faint red marks from where I'd struggled earlier. "She's been down there more than once," he muttered to Torres. "I know," she replied. I sat still as they collected evidence. They moved through the house with measured urgency, opening doors, photographing rooms, checking locks and windows. Verena was now seated in a dining chair, guarded by another officer. She kept muttering about misunderstandings and trying her best, but the words weren't sticking anymore. Torres crouched in front of me again, softer this time. "You fought smart," she said. "That watch probably saved your life." I blinked, and for the first time in so long I let myself breathe. The sound of Verena's voice clawed through the station hallway as the door closed behind her. Something about lies, something about betrayal, but her words didn't land anymore. Not here. Not now. Officer Torres gently guided me to a quieter room near the back of the precinct, her hand steady on my shoulder. It was the first time in 2 years that someone touched me without suspicion or manipulation. I didn't know how much I needed that. Verena, meanwhile, was shouting behind us as officers escorted her to holding. "She's manipulating you! She's always been good at that! Just ask Dorian!" I didn't flinch. Torres didn't blink. We just kept walking. Inside the small, softly lit room, a female officer handed me a bottle of water. I didn't realize how dry my throat was until it touched my lips. "Take your time," Torres said, sitting across from me. "But we need to go over some things together. Can you stay with me?" I nodded. She took out a tablet and gestured to my wrist. "May I sync your watch to our system?" I extended my arm. My fingers felt numb, like they belonged to someone else. Torres connected the device and waited while the data uploaded. The screen showed the last 9 months of logs, heart rate spikes, audio recordings, timestamps, movement tracking. My chest tightened just seeing it laid out like that. All those moments when I thought I was alone, screaming into a void, had actually been captured by something I wore like a second skin. "You've been preparing for this," she said, almost to herself. I nodded again. I didn't trust my voice just yet. She tapped the screen a few more times, scrolling through graphs, examining patterns. Then she turned the tablet toward me. "These spikes," she pointed out, "occur at almost the same times, weeks apart. Same dates Dorian was out of town, same duration, same heart rate surges." Her voice was calm but clear. "Do you know what this means?" "It means," I said slowly, "that I wasn't making it up." "It means," she replied, "you were never the unstable one." She stood, motioned to another officer, and asked them to begin reviewing the audio files. The room filled with the soft hum of equipment, beeps from scanners, and low voices organizing the evidence. A few minutes later, the first file played. Verena's voice cut through the room like a serrated knife. "You want to act like a little brat? I'll treat you like one. You think anyone cares what you think?" Click. Another clip began, my voice, faint and shaking. "Please, I didn't do anything. I just forgot to text back. I didn't mean—" Slam. Verena again. "If you ever open your mouth about this, I'll make sure you regret it. Understand me?" I looked down at my hands, now folded in my lap. Nobody in the room spoke for a while. No one needed to. Then the door opened. A familiar voice, shaky, older, guilt clinging to every word. I heard what happened. I need to talk to someone. I turned slowly. It was Mary Beth, the housekeeper who used to work with us when my mom was still alive. She had left not long after Verena moved in, said it was too much for her. I'd always wondered why she never looked me in the eyes when she left. Now I knew. Officer Torres stepped out into the hall with her, and they talked quietly for a few minutes. When they returned, Mary Beth's eyes were red. I should have said something sooner, she began, barely above a whisper. I saw things, not everything, but enough. Times when Felicity was locked in her room, times when I heard crying from behind the basement door. I never believed what Verena told me, not really. But I didn't push back. I told myself it wasn't my business. She looked right at me. I was scared of her, but I'm more ashamed that I didn't speak sooner. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because hearing someone finally admit it, that they'd seen it, that I hadn't imagined it, gave me something stronger than tears. It gave me ground to stand on. Torres thanked Mary Beth and walked her out. Then she came back, this time with a printed copy of the audio files and a folder filled with my watch's data. She laid it on the table like a shield. "Are you ready to talk now?" she asked. So I did. I told them everything, every incident, every bruise I'd covered up with sleeves, every time Verena told me to be a good girl and keep quiet, every time Dorian looked away because he didn't want the truth to ruin his comfortable illusion. I talked for over an hour. My voice cracked a few times, but I didn't stop. When I was done, Torres looked me in the eye. "We believe you," she said. Outside the room, I could hear Verena's voice rising again. "You're making a mistake. She's manipulative. She's not innocent." Another officer's voice, cold and firm. "That's enough, ma'am." There was a shuffle, the sound of handcuffs tightening, a door buzzing open. Torres stood and walked with me to the hallway. A moment later, Verena passed by. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time, she looked scared, not outraged, not superior, scared. They led her past the reception desk toward the holding cell. She was still talking, still spinning stories, but no one was paying attention. The charges came in quickly after that: child endangerment, false imprisonment, obstruction of justice. They read them aloud, one by one, and all I could think about was how small her voice sounded in the echo of the hallway. When they walked her away, I didn't smile, I didn't cheer, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt like the air around me belonged to me again. It wasn't a celebration, but it was justice. He stood in the doorway like a ghost, still wearing his work coat, briefcase dangling from one hand, eyes wide and unfocused. Dorian didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, then at Officer Torres, then at the stack of printed transcripts in her hands. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat had gone dry the moment he walked in, like my body knew this was the moment I had both prayed for and dreaded. He finally breathed. I didn't know. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't defensive, but it wasn't an apology either. He sank into the chair across from me, and his fingers, those same hands that used to lift me onto his shoulders when I was 5, the ones that steadied my bike without training wheels, shook as they reached for the folder Officer Torres handed him. "This is everything we've compiled," she said gently. "From her smartwatch, from audio logs, from your former housekeeper. You should read it." All of it. I watched his eyes skim the first few lines. His face paled when he reached the transcript marked Deck 14 Basement Audio. Verena's voice filled the air again through a clip. "She's nothing but a burden, Dorian. You just don't want to admit it." He flinched. He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't ask if the audio was doctored. He didn't try to rationalize. That silence, that long, echoing silence, was its own confession. When he finally looked up at me, the weight in his eyes was heavier than anything I had ever carried, and I had carried a lot. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't want to see it." That was the part that hurt more than the basement door, more than the isolation. It wasn't that he hadn't seen. It was that he chose not to, over and over again. "I know," I said softly. It was the only thing I could say that didn't burn. He stood and walked toward the glass wall of the precinct's hallway. Through it, he could see Verena in the holding cell, her face red, eyes puffy, pacing like a caged animal. When she saw him, she ran to the window. "Dorian, thank God! You know me! You know I wouldn't—" Her voice cracked. He didn't move, didn't nod, didn't flinch. "Please," she pleaded. "I did this for us. For our peace. I was protecting our life, our home. Don't let her twist this." Still, he didn't respond. She banged on the glass. "You're just going to turn your back on me?" He turned his back on her. 3 days later, he filed for divorce. The paperwork was swift. The evidence, irrefutable. The court granted me a temporary restraining order, then a permanent one. Full custody was transferred to him, but only on the condition that I agreed. They asked me in chambers, "Do you want to live with your father again?" I looked at him. This man who had let so much happen, who had believed a woman's warmth over his daughter's bruises. But he had shown up. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for in the beginning. "Yes," I said. Verena's charges escalated as the DA received more files. Her lawyer, some well-dressed guy who probably thought he could spin this into family drama, quit the case after listening to 10 minutes of audio from the basement. I overheard him in the hallway on his way out. She should be in prison, not court. At the sentencing hearing, she didn't speak. She just stared ahead like she still couldn't believe any of this had happened to her. But I spoke. They asked if I wanted to say anything before final judgment. I walked up to the stand, notes in my hand, but I didn't look down at them once. "I don't want revenge," I said, voice steady. "I want safety. I want silence that isn't rooted in fear. I want to live without looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next lie will be told about me. I want to belong in my own home." The judge nodded. "You're remarkably composed," she said. "Thank you for your courage." I stepped down and sat next to my father, who hadn't stopped wringing his hands the entire time. Weeks passed. We packed up the house on Maywood Lane together. He asked if I wanted to keep anything. I said no, not a fork, not a lamp, not a photo. "I want a fresh start," I told him. We moved into a modest apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't fancy. The walls were thin, and the neighbor's dog barked too much, but it was ours. There was no basement, no rooms with locked doors, no cameras hidden in stuffed animals, just a 2-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture and a calendar we remembered to flip together each month. He cooked dinner every night. Nothing complicated, usually grilled cheese or spaghetti, but he always asked what I wanted. He listened now, not just to my words, but to the pauses between them. The way I shifted in my seat, the hesitation in my voice. "You never have to earn peace," he told me one night as we ate on the balcony. And for once, I believed him. Some nights, I still wake up with my heart racing, my hand pressed against my wrist where the old watch used to be. It's not fear, not exactly. More like my body still checking in, still bracing for a door to slam, or a voice to rise just outside the bedroom. My therapist says it's normal. Trauma doesn't keep a clock. Healing isn't linear. It circles. It echoes. "You're safe now," she tells me every time. "Let your nervous system learn that." I believe her. Most days, the nightmares have become less frequent. But they still come, slipping in through the cracks when I forget to double-check the locks or when a familiar scent pulls me backward into that basement. The silence there was a monster all its own. Thick, alive, oppressive. It taught me how to hear my own heartbeat and count the seconds between breaths. I carry it with me, not as a burden, but as a reminder. Silence can be dangerous, but sometimes silence can be power. It took time, but I found my voice again, not by shouting, not by demanding the world to hear me, but by telling my story on my own terms. At first, it was a blog, just a simple site with no photos, no real name, just words. I wrote about what it felt like to be disbelieved, what it felt like to know something was wrong and have no one say it out loud. I shared small moments. I talked about the watch, about how it vibrated in the dark like a heartbeat from someone far away, about how it gave me a sliver of hope, Then I started posting clips. Edited audio from the recordings. Nothing graphic, just enough. I attached context. I explained how I had learned to document, how the tech helped save my life when words weren't enough, and people responded. Comments started coming in. Quiet at first, then steady. I thought I was crazy too. This happened to me, but no one believed me either. You made me feel less alone. I read every one. Dorian would peek into my room sometimes and ask, "Still writing?" And I'd nod. I didn't need to say anything more. He never pushed. When Aunt Illyria visited that spring, the whole apartment seemed to breathe differently. She stayed for a week, slept on our worn-out couch, took long walks with me, helped rearrange the kitchen even though it barely fit two people standing side by side. One evening after dinner, Dorian looked at her across the table and said, "You saved her." Illyria took a sip of wine and shook her head gently. "She saved herself," she said. I just gave her the tools. It was the first time I truly believed that. We laughed that night. Real laughter, the kind that fills a room and lingers long after you stop. It felt foreign at first, but I didn't push it away. Months later, Verena's trial came to a close. She was sentenced to 15 years, no parole for 10. The courtroom was full, but she kept her eyes on the floor during the verdict. Not once did she look at me, but I looked at her. I met her eyes as the judge finished reading the sentence. I didn't need her apology. I didn't want her to flinch. I wanted her to see me, really see me, for the first time. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said. She blinked, just once, then looked away. Back at the apartment, I kept the old smartwatch in a wooden box on my bookshelf. I couldn't wear it anymore. The scratches across the screen made it hard to read, and the strap had been replaced so many times it barely held, but I didn't throw it away. I bought a newer model, not because I was scared, but because I respected what the first one gave me. It was never just about the alerts. It was the proof. It was the data. It was the quiet witness when no one else would listen. It helped me tell the truth, I once wrote, when I didn't know how else to be heard. These days, I spend my weekends volunteering at a teen advocacy center downtown. I help other kids understand their rights, how to document, who to call, when to trust their gut, even if the adults around them say otherwise. I don't tell my story unless I'm asked, and even then, only the parts that matter. The point isn't my pain, it's the path out of it. I help one girl draft an exit plan after weeks of her school counselor brushing her off. I sit beside another as she tells her grandmother the truth for the first time. I don't rescue them. I don't promise them it'll be easy. But I give them something I once had to claw for. A mirror. A map. A little red blinking light in the dark. At night, when the apartment is quiet and the city hums outside our window, I sit by the open balcony door with a cup of tea and let myself think. About all the versions of me that didn't make it here. The one who stayed silent. The one who believed she was the problem. The one who almost gave up. They're all part of me. But they're not the end of the story. They thought silence was my weakness. But it was my strength. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming my place in my own home. Light filters through the sheer curtains in my bedroom, landing on the bookshelf, warming the corners of the room that used to feel cold. This space, it's mine now, and I finally feel safe in it. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most wear the warmest smiles, but truth has a way of surfacing, even in silence. What Felicity's story reminds us is that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes, it means you're watching, collecting, waiting for the moment when truth can finally speak louder than lies. Have you ever been silenced by someone who was supposed to protect you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true, powerful stories like this one.